This is dispatches from r/legal advice, the subreddit where the phrase, quote, "I just need to know if this is legal," end quote, is always, without exception, the preamble to something that is not legal. And the sentence, quote, "My sibling would never do that," end quote, has a mean time to falsification of approximately 11 minutes. Tonight we are talking about money, family money, inheritance money, the specific kind of money that, at the moment of a parent's death, reveals to every adult child sitting around a mahogany table that the person they love the most in the world is, and has always been, the person they are now attempting to sue for the contents of a china cabinet.
The china cabinet.
A piece of furniture that, in every functioning American family, is considered decorative. And that, in every non-functioning American family, has been since approximately 1994. Quietly understood to be the hill on which at least 2 siblings will eventually die.
5 letters. 5 people who went to a funeral and discovered, somewhere between the eulogy and the ham sandwiches in the church basement, that they were in a lawsuit. Each of these stories involves, and I am going to be precise, a real dollar amount. Because that, as any estate attorney will tell you, is the only thing that ever actually matters.
The ham sandwiches.
In the history of American estate litigation, not one major sibling inheritance lawsuit has ever been filed that did not begin, at some point in its timeline, at a buffet table in a church basement, next to a tray of ham sandwiches that nobody was actually eating.
Letter the first. R/legal advice. The title, quote, "My sister handed me a will the day of Dad's funeral. The font on page 3 is different. She printed it at Kinkos," end quote.
She printed it at Kinkos.
The single most damning forensic detail ever submitted to a probate court in the continental United States. A document purporting to be the last will and testament of a grown man, with 3 different fonts on 3 different pages, smelling faintly of FedEx office toner, handed over beside an open casket.
Our author writes, quote, "My father died in October. He was 71. He had not been sick. He had a heart attack in his garage. My sister, Melissa, was the one who found him. Melissa had been, quote, helping him with his paperwork, end quote, for about 18 months before he died. I live in another state. I did not know what paperwork she was helping him with. I do now," end quote.
Helping him with his paperwork.
The universal euphemism for the 18-month period during which a single adult child, usually the one who lives closest, begins the slow, methodical process of quietly relocating the rest of the family's inheritance into a single savings account at a regional credit union.
Quote, "At the funeral, Melissa pulled me aside. Melissa handed me a manila envelope. Melissa said, quote, 'Dad gave me this last summer. He asked me to keep it safe until now. It is his will. I already had the lawyer review it. Everything is straightforward,' end quote.
Everything is straightforward.
A sentence that has, in the entire 400-year history of American probate law, never been true. The word, quote, 'straightforward,' end quote, when uttered by a sibling at a funeral, is the legal equivalent of the phrase, quote, 'I can explain,' end quote.
Quote, "I opened the envelope that night in my hotel room. It was a 3-page document. Page 1 was typed in Times New Roman. Page 2 was typed in Times New Roman. Page 3, which contained the asset distribution clause, was typed in Calibri. My father did not own a computer. My father did not know what Calibri was. I am not sure he knew what a font was," end quote.
Page 3 was Calibri.
I want every person listening to this to appreciate the absolute forensic beauty of what has just been committed. A forgery so brazen that it contains within its own body the evidence of its forgery, in a font that did not ship on Microsoft Word until 2007. On a will that was allegedly drafted by a man who last updated his handwriting in the Carter administration.
Quote, "Page 3 awarded Melissa, quote, the family home, all liquid assets, the contents of the garage, the 2018 Chevy Silverado, and the $412,000 Vanguard account," end quote. Page 3 awarded me, and I am quoting exactly, quote, the fishing rod, end quote. That is the entire clause, 2 nouns and a definite article, end quote.
The fishing rod.
The most damning inheritance clause ever drafted in the nation's history. A daughter who is receiving $400,000 has allotted her only brother a single noun. Not a rod and reel, not the fishing gear. The fishing rod, the definite article, is the entire tell. She only remembered the one she could see from the garage window.
Quote, I called my father's actual lawyer the next day. My father's actual lawyer is a man named Bill. Bill had been my father's lawyer for 23 years. Bill said, quote, your father never updated his will. The most recent version I have is from 2011. In that version, the estate is split equally between you and your sister. I have never seen the document you are describing. End quote. End quote.
Bill has never seen it.
The single most load-bearing sentence in any probate case, when the attorney of record for 23 years has never seen the will that was presented at the funeral. The will did not exist on the day the attorney stopped calling. And the will did not exist for a reason.
Quote, I hired a forensic document examiner. I paid her $640. Her report, which was 7 pages long and in Times New Roman throughout, concluded that page 3 had been printed on a different printer, on a different weight of paper, at a different time, by a different person, and, the kicker, that the signature at the bottom had been photocopied, not signed, photocopied onto the page from another document. End quote.
Photocopied. The signature.
Melissa has committed not 1 but 3 separate felonies in what appears to be a single 22-minute stop at a strip mall Kinkos. And she did it on her lunch break. And she paid for it in cash. And she did not think, at any point during those 22 minutes, that her brother might notice.
Quote, I confronted Melissa. Melissa said, quote, Dad told me in person what he wanted. The old will was a mistake. I just put it in writing for him. It is what he would have wanted. End quote. I said, quote, Melissa, you forged Dad's signature. End quote. Melissa said, quote, I transcribed his wishes. There is a difference. End quote.
I transcribed his wishes.
A defense so legally hollow it could be used as a wind instrument. Melissa is the first person in American jurisprudence to argue that forgery is just, quote, assisted journaling, end quote, on behalf of a dead man.
Quote, I filed suit. The case is ongoing. Melissa has been charged with felony forgery. Her attorney has, so far, submitted 3 separate motions. All 3 are printed in Calibri. I am not making that up. End quote.
All 3 in Calibri.
Melissa's lawyer, in the course of defending her against a forgery charge, has unconsciously reenacted the exact crime Melissa committed. The entire legal system is now, in effect, running on a single font. And the font is Calibri. And that is America.
Letter the second. R/raised by narcissists. The title, quote, my brother sold our grandmother's $14,000 piano on Craigslist for $200, 2 hours before the will reading, end quote.
$200.
An act of financial destruction so pure, so completely unmotivated by rational economic self-interest that it can only be explained by one thing. And that thing is a 40-year grudge about who was given the bigger bowl of Cheerios in 1987.
Our author writes, quote, my grandmother, Nana Pearl, passed away at the age of 93. Nana Pearl had in her living room a 1962 Steinway baby grand piano. Nana Pearl had played that piano every day of her life until the age of 89. Nana Pearl had in her will specifically bequeathed the piano to me. I am the only one in the family who can play. I have been playing since I was 6, end quote.
Since I was 6.
A credential that has, in the eyes of any reasonable judge, already settled the question. The only thing left at this point in the story is for us to discover how our author's brother, a man who cannot play, managed to beat the legal system by approximately 120 minutes.
Quote, the will reading was scheduled for Saturday at 2 p.m. at the lawyer's office. My brother Kevin lived in the house. Kevin had, for the 2 weeks between Nana Pearl's death and the will reading, been, quote, looking after the place, end quote. I thought nothing of it. I had my own grief to handle. This was a mistake, end quote.
Looking after the place.
In the entire recorded history of the English language, there has never been a more legally weaponized euphemism than the phrase, quote, looking after the place, end quote. It is, in every case, the preamble to the liquidation of a grandmother's estate via a Craigslist ad posted on a Tuesday at 11 p.m.
Quote, at noon on Saturday, 2 hours before the will reading, I drove to Nana Pearl's house. I wanted to say goodbye to the piano. I let myself in with my key. The piano was gone. The living room was empty. There were 4 deep indentations in the carpet where the legs had been. There was a post-it note on the mantelpiece. The post-it note was in Kevin's handwriting. The post-it note said, quote, sold the piano, needed gas money. K, end quote, end quote.
Needed gas money.
Kevin has liquidated a $14,000 Steinway, an instrument that is in the permanent collection of several American conservatories. 4, and these are his own written words on a post-it note. Gas money. I want to stress that Kevin drives a Toyota Camry. The tank is $60.
Quote, I called Kevin. Kevin picked up. I said, quote, Kevin, where is Nana Pearl's piano? End quote. Kevin said, quote, I sold it. Some guy from Craigslist, he came with a U-Haul this morning. He gave me $200. I thought it was fair because I had to help him carry it out. End quote. End quote.
He had to help carry it out.
Kevin has just explained on the phone to his own sister that he considered the $200 price point fair because he had to participate in the manual labor of removing the piano he did not own from the house he did not own. The logic is, in its own twisted way, airtight and entirely illegal.
Quote, I said, quote, Kevin, that piano was in the will. Nana Pearl gave it to me. End quote. Kevin said, quote, yeah, I know. That is why I had to sell it before the reading. End quote.
Before the reading.
I would like to formally nominate Kevin for the single most honest piece of confession ever recorded in a petty family crime. He has not only admitted to the theft, he has admitted to the exact motive, the exact window of opportunity, and the exact malicious intent, all on a phone call to the victim 2 hours before a lawyer.
Quote, I drove straight to the will reading. I told the lawyer. The lawyer said, quote, this is a criminal matter, end quote, and called the police. The police opened a case file. The Craigslist buyer, who is a music teacher named Ron, voluntarily returned the piano when he found out. Ron did not know. Ron felt terrible. Ron asked for his $200 back. I gave him $300. He was the only decent person in this entire story. End quote.
The only decent person.
Ron is a saint. Ron should have a feast day. Ron, a middle school orchestra teacher from somewhere in the county, is the only person in this entire story who behaved, at any point, like an adult. Ron deserves, at minimum, his own small park, with a bench and a plaque.
Letter the third. R/legal advice. The title, quote, we just discovered Mom took out a $180,000 second mortgage on the family house and gave it all to my golden child brother. End quote.
180,000.
A dollar amount so specific, so recent, and so obviously bank traceable that you know immediately from the first sentence that it is going to be recovered. The only question is, how many of our author's holidays the lawsuit is going to ruin on the way?
Our author writes, quote, my mother is 74. My mother has lived in the same house in Sacramento for 41 years. The house, as of last year, was fully paid off. It was appraised at $620,000. My mother has 3 children, my older brother Scott me and my younger sister Megan. Scott is the golden child. Scott has never held a job longer than 14 months. Scott is currently 47 years old. End quote.
47 years old.
At a certain age, around 45, a man who has never held a job for longer than 14 months ceases to be, in the language of the American family, a late bloomer and becomes, in the language of the estate attorney, a line item.
Quote, my sister Megan, who lives closest to our mother, called me in January. Megan said, quote, I was helping Mom with her mail. I found a letter from Wells Fargo. Mom has a second mortgage, end quote. I said, quote, for how much, end quote. Megan said, quote, $180,000, end quote, end quote.
From Wells Fargo.
I want to stress that Wells Fargo in this story is not the villain. This is the first and, I suspect, the last time that sentence will ever be written. Wells Fargo in this particular case is the innocent bystander who also happens to have very good record-keeping.
Quote, we asked Mom about it. Mom said, quote, oh, sweetheart, do not worry about that. I gave it to Scotty for his restaurant, end quote. I said, quote, Mom, Scotty does not have a restaurant, end quote. Mom said, quote, he is going to. He is working on the business plan, end quote, end quote.
The businessy plan.
I am going to tell every person listening to this something that will save them, collectively, several $1 million over the course of their lifetimes. The phrase, quote, he is working on the business plan, end quote, from the mouth of an aging parent, is not, as commonly believed, a description of entrepreneurial activity. It is a credit score.
Quote, the money was, we learned, not going into a restaurant. Scotty had, in the past 6 months, purchased a used BMW, a jet ski, a $3,000 aquarium for his apartment, and a full set of custom golf clubs. Scotty had not purchased any business equipment. Scotty had not signed any lease. Scotty had, in fact, never been employed in the restaurant industry, except for a 41-day period in 2004, at a TGI Fridays from which he was terminated for, quote, attendance, end quote, end quote.
A $3,000 aquarium.
A 47-year-old man has, with his mother's home equity, purchased a freshwater tropical aquarium that costs more than his own rent. This is not a family tragedy. This is an episode of Animal Planet, funded entirely by a predatory refinance.
Quote, we confronted Scotty. Scotty said, quote, Mom offered. I did not ask. I am not doing anything wrong, end quote. I said, quote, Scotty, you are spending Mom's house, end quote. Scotty said, quote, it is still her house. She still lives there. I am just using the money, end quote.
I am just using the money.
A sentence that demonstrates, with the economy of a haiku, a fundamental misunderstanding of what money is, where it comes from, and what happens when a 74-year-old woman can no longer make her mortgage payment because her son needs to feed imported tetras.
Quote, Megan and I have hired an elder law attorney. The attorney has filed for guardianship and has placed Mom's accounts in a protective freeze. The attorney has also told us, quietly, that there is not much we can do to recover the $180,000 because legally it was given, not taken. But the aquarium, she said, is a strong Exhibit A, end quote.
The aquarium is Exhibit A.
In the history of elder financial abuse litigation, no single inanimate object has ever made a cleaner opening argument on behalf of the prosecution than a $3,000 freshwater tank in the apartment of a 47-year-old man who claims he is opening a restaurant.
Letter the 4th, R/Petty Revenge. The title, quote, my aunt disinherited me from a $400,000 estate over a sleepover in 1987. I found her Roth IRA beneficiary form in 2024, end quote.
IN 1987.
The kind of grudge that can only be sustained at full load for 37 continuous years by the specific brand of American ant, who also refuses to use the word, quote, microwave, end quote, and calls it, quote, the radar range, end quote. We are dealing with a very specific woman.
Our author writes, quote, "My Aunt Barbara never married. Aunt Barbara never had children. Aunt Barbara loved me when I was a little girl. Aunt Barbara loved me very much until I was 8 years old. Until the sleepover." End quote.
Until the sleepover.
The single most ominous setup sentence ever written on the petty revenge subreddit. Whatever this 8-year-old girl did at a sleepover in the Reagan administration is about to cost her, in 2024 dollars, approximately $400,000. And legally, there is nothing she did wrong.
Quote, "In December of 1987, I slept over at Aunt Barbara's house. Aunt Barbara had a cat named Mr. Whiskers. I was 8. I was scared of the cat. In the middle of the night, I got up to use the bathroom. In the dark, I stepped on Mr. Whiskers' tail. Mr. Whiskers yowled. I screamed. Aunt Barbara came running. Mr. Whiskers was fine. I, apparently, was not." End quote.
Mr. Whiskers.
A cat, an 8-year-old girl, a dark hallway, a tail, an accident. This is the inciting incident of a 37-year Cold War. The Cuban Missile Crisis had a shorter resolution timeline than whatever Aunt Barbara decided in that hallway to do with the rest of her estate planning.
Quote, "Aunt Barbara told my mother the next day that I had, quote, stomped on the cat on purpose, end quote, and was, quote, not to be trusted in her home, end quote. My mother apologized. I apologized. I was 8. I did not know what was happening. Aunt Barbara did not invite me back. Not to Christmas, not to Easter, not to her 70th birthday, not to her 80th. Not ever." End quote.
Not ever.
A grudge so perfectly preserved it should be displayed behind glass at the Smithsonian, Aunt Barbara maintained. For the entirety of the Reagan, Bush, Clinton, second Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden administrations, a sustained, documented, categorical refusal to forgive a child for stepping on a cat in the dark.
Quote, "Aunt Barbara passed away in March of 2024. At her funeral, I learned that her estate, totaling approximately $400,000, had been left entirely to the local animal shelter in the memory of, quote, Mr. Whiskers' beloved companion, cruelly injured by a family member." End quote. That is a direct quote from her will. I am listed by name. I am listed as, quote, the family member, end quote, end quote.
List by name.
This is the single most committed piece of long-form petty revenge in the history of probate law. A woman has, in a legally binding document, identified her 8-year-old niece by full legal name as the person responsible for the mild tail injury of a cat in 1987, and has used that identification as the basis for a $400,000 charitable donation.
Quote, "Then, in the fall of 2204, I was helping my mother go through Aunt Barbara's storage unit. In a box, under a pile of old Reader's Digests, I found an envelope. Inside was Aunt Barbara's Roth IRA beneficiary form from 1994, which she had apparently never updated. The beneficiary on the Roth IRA was, and I am not making this up, me." End quote.
She never updated it.
For the entire 37-year duration of her grudge, Aunt Barbara was walking around with a retirement account that, in the event of her death, would pay out directly to the exact niece she had been carrying a grudge against. She thought about the will. She forgot about the beneficiary form. A beneficiary form overrides a will. That is the law.
Quote, "The Roth IRA had, as of her date of death, a balance of $117,642. I am going to receive all of it, tax-free. The animal shelter will get the $400,000. I will get the Roth. I am going to use some of it to foster cats. I am going to name the first one Mr. Whiskers." End quote.
Foster cats.
the most emotionally literate act of closure in the history of the subreddit. Our author is going to use Aunt Barbara's own money to foster, in her memory, the species of animal that was the original pretext for disowning her. This is not revenge. This is architecture.
Letter the fifth. And the kicker. R/legal advice. The title. Quote, my father's life insurance beneficiary is a woman named Cheryl that nobody in the family has ever heard of. End quote.
A woman named Cheryl.
In the entire catalog of American first names, there is not a single name more ominous in the context of a father's life insurance policy than Cheryl. It beats Tammy. It beats Deborah. It even beats the previously unbeatable middle name for this sort of thing, which is Lorraine.
Our author writes, quote, my father died in January at the age of 68. My father had been married to my mother for 41 years. My father had 3 adult children. My father had, as we discovered 1 week after the funeral, a State Farm life insurance policy worth $320,000. The named beneficiary as of a 2019 update was not my mother, was not any of his children, was not his brother or his sister. The named beneficiary was a woman named, quote, Cheryl Ann Petrowski, end quote.
Cheryl Ann Petrowski.
A full 3-name beneficiary designation, complete with an ethnic surname that bears absolutely no resemblance to anyone in our author's family tree. This is not a clerical error. This is a choice. A choice made by a grown man in 2019 at a State Farm branch with a pen in his own handwriting.
Quote, nobody in my family had ever heard of Cheryl Ann Petrowski. Not my mother, not my father's brother, not my father's best friend of 38 years, Dale, not my father's bowling league. We Googled her. We found a LinkedIn profile. Cheryl Ann Petrowski, 56, of Toledo, Ohio, regional sales manager for a medical supply company. Her profile photo showed her standing next to, and I am not making this up, a boat, end quote.
Standing next to a boat.
I want to stress that in the specific iconography of the American extramarital affair, the LinkedIn profile picture of the other woman is 90% of the time taken on a boat. The boat is the tell. The boat is the place where your father took her, that he told your mother was a work retreat.
Quote, we contacted Cheryl. My sister called her from her own phone because my mother refused. Cheryl answered. My sister said, quote, my name is Rachel. I am the daughter of Gerald. He passed away in January. You are listed as the beneficiary of his life insurance policy. End quote. Cheryl was silent for approximately 10 seconds. Then Cheryl said, quote, oh no, end quote, end quote.
Oh no.
The universal 2-syllable confession. No innocent party, when told that they are the named beneficiary on a dead man's $320,000 life insurance policy, has ever responded, quote, oh no, end quote. An innocent party responds, quote, I am so sorry for your loss. Who, end quote. Cheryl did not say who. Cheryl knew who.
Quote, Cheryl said, quote, I did not know Jerry had done that. I told him not to. I am so sorry. I do not want the money. I do not deserve the money. Please give it to your mother. End quote. My sister said, quote, Cheryl, can I ask what your relationship was with my father? End quote. Cheryl started crying. Cheryl said, quote, I loved him for 6 years. End quote. And
For 6 years.
6 years. 19% of her parents' 41-year marriage. A duration long enough to completely reframe every Thanksgiving, every birthday, every quiet Sunday morning coffee of the last 6 years of our author's life. And Cheryl, to her credit, said it out loud. Cheryl did not lie. Cheryl just cried.
quote, Cheryl signed over her rights to the policy the next day. She hired her own lawyer at her own expense to make it airtight. She sent my mother a handwritten card. The card said, quote, I am so sorry for what he took from you. I will not be the one who takes the rest. Cheryl. End quote. My mother read the card once. My mother put the card in the garbage disposal. My mother turned the disposal on. My mother said, quote, fine. At least that is over. End quote. End quote.
The garbage disposal.
The finest use of a garbage disposal in recorded American domestic history. Not for food. Not for coffee grounds. For a handwritten apology from a regional sales manager in Toledo, offered with genuine remorse, run through a quarter-horsepower motor under the kitchen sink, and sent via the municipal sewer directly to hell.
Quote, my mother got the $320,000. My mother used it to pay off the house. My mother also, on the exact same day the check cleared, changed her will. Her new will splits her estate equally between her 3 children, with a specific clause stating that if any of us ever take a woman named Cheryl to a boat, we are immediately disinherited. I am not making this up. End quote.
Never a boat.
An estate clause so specific, so unambiguous, so surgically targeted, that it is now, technically, the only known clause in American probate law that prohibits a particular combination of noun and preposition. Cheryl, boat, disinheritance. One of these is not like the others, and all of them, in this woman's mother's household, are now load-bearing.
5 letters, 5 families, a Kinkos forgery, a Craigslist piano, a $180,000 aquarium, a 37-year-old grudge about a cat, and a woman named Cheryl standing next to a boat. Each of these stories involves a precise, traceable dollar amount, and each of those dollar amounts is, as it turns out, exactly the price of knowing who your family actually is.
The price of knowing.
A lesson that, ironically, every American family eventually pays for in cash, and that nobody in the entire 400-year history of the Republic has ever been willing to learn before the check actually clears.
I want to say one thing, carefully and specifically to anyone listening who has a living parent, a surviving sibling, a jointly owned house, a Wells Fargo account, or an unopened manila envelope on their kitchen counter with their name on it. Go to a lawyer, not your sibling's lawyer, not your mother's lawyer, a lawyer you choose. Pay the consultation fee. It is, I promise you, a fraction of the cost of a Steinway, a fraction of the cost of an aquarium, and an infinitesimally small fraction of the cost of a Cheryl.
A fraction of a Cheryl.
The single best financial metric ever coined by the r/legal advice subreddit. The Cheryl is now, as of this episode, an informal unit of estate risk exposure. 1 Cheryl equals $320,000. And a boat.
This has been Dispatches from r/legal advice. I remain your correspondent. The money is never the point until it is the only point, and when it becomes the only point, it has a way of sorting the entire family in 20 minutes into the people who will show up at the lawyer's office and the people who will sell the piano on the way. Get the will out of the drawer, check the beneficiary forms, and for the love of all that is holy, if your sibling starts, quote, helping with the paperwork, end quote, you get on a plane.
You get on a plane.
And you bring the lawyer. And you bring the fishing rod. It is, after all, the only thing left in the will with your name on it.